Hello and welcome to STEM with Mr. N, where I perform different demonstrations and explain the science behind what we're seeing. Because it's now winter and the temperature's starting to drop, this week I'm going to explore the question, how do animals in polar regions stay warm? Let's check it out. When it gets cold outside, humans put clothes on to act as a thermal layer, and this helps trap warmth next to our bodies. Animals can't do that when it gets cold, however. So how do animals, especially in polar regions, stay warm in very cold temperatures? That's what this week's activity is going to explore. For this activity, you will need 4 identical plates, 4 identical freezer bags, some butter or lard, a knife to cut that with, and ideally a chopping board, some feathers, and I'm also going to be using some thermometer strips, but it's up to you whether you want to use a thermometer or just use your hand to check the different temperatures. There's a very important concept in science called a fair test when you're trying to compare the results of different things. That is why I am using identical plates and identical freezer bags, because if any of these had a different plate or a different freezer bag, that could affect the results of the experiment. That is also why I'm setting them all up in the same area at the same time, so that no other factors in the environment can affect the results of this experiment. The first thing I'm going to do is take one of my plates, I'm going to put an empty sealed freezer bag on top, and then I'm going to put a thermometer strip on top of that. This will tell me the temperature reading from the bag. Then I'm going to take a second plate and another bag. I'm going to slightly open one end of this bag and blow air into it, and then I'm going to seal it shut. I'm going to put this on the plate and again put a thermometer strip on top. For the third bag, I'm going to be using the lard. So I'm going to take my chopping board, knife and lard, and I'm going to cut some thin strips of the lard and put these inside another freezer bag, seal it tight closed with the air pressed out, and put a thermometer strip on top. Then I'm going to take my final plate and bag, and I'm going to be stuffing craft feathers inside of this, sealing the bag tight again with the air pressed out, and then I'm going to put a thermometer strip on top. Now that all 4 of my plates and bags are set up, I'm going to read the temperatures on the thermometer strips and make a note of these in a notepad. Later on, I'll be able to look back at this and see how much the temperature has changed, and that will show me how effective any of these are at keeping out the cold. Now that I've made a note of all the temperatures, it's time to move on to the next part of this activity, and that is checking the effectiveness of each item for blocking out the cold. To do this, I'm going to put 3 ice cubes onto the first plate, put the empty bag back on top and the thermometer strip back on top of the bag. I'm going to do this for the 3 other bags that are remaining, putting 3 ice cubes on each plate, because again, I want this to be a fair test. So it wouldn't be fair if I only used 2 ice cubes on one and 4 ice cubes on another. So every plate has 3 ice cubes with the bag on top and the thermometer strip back on top of the bag. Once that's set up, I'm just going to leave it sitting for 10 minutes and then come back and check on the results. As the time is going on, the temperatures are changing on the thermometer strips. The temperature very quickly changed on the empty bag and is gradually changing on the other 3 bags. It will be interesting to see what the final results are at the end of the 10 minutes. Now the 10 minutes is up and it's time to check in on the results of this experiment. Again, I'm going to read the temperature on each thermometer and make a note of these in my notepad and compare it to the starting temperature before I put the ice cubes down. You'll notice that the empty bag dropped by 12 degrees Celsius, the bag with the lard dropped by 7 degrees Celsius, and the bag with the air and the bag with the feather each dropped by 3 degrees Celsius. This shows us that the bag with air and feathers were better at trapping heat. But what has this got to do with animals in polar regions? Well, animals, when they're trying to stay warm in extreme climates, make use of the 3 most effective ways of trapping heat that we have just looked at in this activity. To start with, just under their skin, animals have a layer of fat called blubber. This can also act as a backup food reserve. In this activity, that was represented by the lard. Animals then also have a coat of underfur or downy feathers, and these are quite often hollow and are good at trapping air in them. As we saw, the feathers and the air were good at trapping the heat. Then animals have an outer coat which is usually oily or waxy to make it waterproof, and it usually tends to be hollow as well, which again is good for trapping air in, and as we've seen, trapped air is good for trapping heat. Some animals that live in polar regions are so effective at keeping their heat inside their bodies that they cannot be detected by thermal radiation, showing that the outside of their body is the same temperature as the environment around them, but all the heat of their body is actually being trapped inside. They're not losing any heat to the environment. Humans who live in polar regions usually make clothes using animal skins to take advantage of these heat trapping properties. When humans make synthetic clothes to help keep us warm in cold temperatures, quite often these use things like fake fur or fake feathers to help trap air pockets and keep the heat in. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I would like to take this opportunity to answer any science questions you have about any science topics at all. So feel free to email me at stemwithmrn@outlook.com and I'll get back to you with answers to your questions. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay up to date on all future content. You can subscribe to the channel by pushing the button here, and I've added links here to the other STEM demos I've done so far, here to my STEM career interviews, and here to my new series of Things You Should Know videos. This has been STEM with Mr. N, exploring how animals stay warm in polar regions.